to win across people who have gone to the Liberal Democrats, who are maybe swing voters who have voted Labour in the past, that Boris Johnson won't be able to do that. He won't bring...
Live on UK TV over who should be the next UK Prime Minister. We'll speak to the BBC's political correspondent Vicky Young, who'll be live with us from the spin room and guide us through all the clashes. They talked about Brexit, they talked about no deal, they also talked about President Trump, and that's because he has continued his astonishing attacks on the British ambassador to Washington, calling him stupid and pompous. He's also lashed out again at Theresa May and her Brexit plan. Anthony Zerka in Washington will guide us through the maelstrom. Hong Kong's leader has said that controversial extradition bill that caused huge protests like this is dead. We'll look at why the opposition say that word is not enough. And in OS Business, we'll look at Italy's massive debt burden and why the European Union continues to be very worried about it. So the two remaining candidates to be the UK's next Prime Minister have been debating each other live on British TV. Here's the moment that it began an hour ago. It was broadcast on ITV, one of the big commercial networks here in the UK. Of course, Brexit came up, and Jeremy Hunt put Boris Johnson on the spot.
If you don't get us out of the EU by the 31st of October, will you resign?
We're going to come out on October the 31st. And I think anybody who goes into this negotiation proposing yet again to kick the can down the road will, I think, run the risk of forfeiting trust with the electorate and also undermining our negotiating position in Brussels.
Could you answer Mr. Hunt's question?
Delay does not deliver a deal.
Julia,
a deadline will deliver a deal. And we must stick to that deadline.
I think it's a no. And what we've got is someone who says it's do or die for the country.
I'm sorry. I think what we have with
I asked you if you'd resign, Boris.
What I have with my opponent is somebody
will you resign if you don't deliver it, yes or no?
My opponent is clearly not committed to coming out of the EU on October the 31st.
Right.
Well, the BBC's Andrew Neil enjoyed it. He says this blue on blue is fun to watch. We'll get more reaction on those who are tuned in. Tim Montgomery, well-known conservative-leaning commentator, says Hunt is coming across as someone who sees Brexit as a bit difficult. Boris is getting the applause for refusing to contemplate defeat. And then here's Peter Walker from The Guardian saying every time Hunt makes an attack on Johnson, Johnson starts to talk over him as if to curb the flow. It seems like a deliberate tactic. Well, there's some evidence of that happening in this clip, in an exchange about Donald Trump and the British ambassador in Washington.
I have a very good relationship with the White House, and I'm very proud of what I was able to build up during my time as Foreign Secretary. I think it's very important that we should have a close friendship, a close partnership with the United States. They're our most important ally. I think the single most important geostrategic fact of the last 100 years has been the closest between the US and the UK.
What do you make of what he said?
I don't think he was dragged into a British political debate in a way he sometimes is. I don't think that's necessarily the right thing for him to do, as Jeremy has said. But let's face it.
So is he wrong to make those comments?
Our relationship with the US is of fantastic importance. On Kim Darroch and on British civil servants, I would just say this. I think it is absolutely vital that the advice that civil servants give to ministers should not be leaked by ministers and should not be commented on by ministers if civil servants are going to feel free to give that advice with the impartiality that they want.
Just to get some facts on this particular point, will Sir Kim Darroch still be in his job at the end of his tenure if you become Prime Minister, Mr. Hunt?
Well, look, I will say this about the relationship with...
It's quite a quick yes or no.
I'm going to answer your question, Julie, and I've answered it very clearly already tonight, but I believe that the relationship with the United States and the relationship between the UK and the USA is the most important alliance in history. On that, I agree with President Trump. But who chooses our ambassadors is a matter for the United Kingdom government and the United Kingdom Prime Minister. So I have made it clear that if I am our next Prime Minister, the ambassador in Washington stays, because it's our decision.
Could we have the same confirmation from you, Mr. Johnson?
I listened very carefully to what Jeremy has just said. I repeat my point. it is vital that our civil service is not politicised by ministers leaking what they say.
Will he still be in his job come January?
Whoever leaked that deserves to be eviscerated.
Boris, just answer the question for once. Go on. Tell us if you'll keep the ambassador in Washington. Come on. I know no one here is going to tell anyone. Just tell us the answer.
Okay.
Go on, Boris.
You haven't liked answering. So would you like to keep him beyond Christmas when he normally retires?
Well, he's due to retire until Christmas, and I will certainly keep him until he's due to retire.
Right. Okay.
I will do that. Now, what about you, though? You've asked me the question.
Thank you.
It's interesting.
I think we want to know your answer, Boris.
Mr. Hunt, let Mr. Johnson answer.
You're the Foreign Secretary. So you're going to keep him into, you wouldn't keep him beyond, you wouldn't extend his term out of sympathy?
I will keep him until he's due to retire,
okay.
And I think we'd like to know if you would.
Well, I'm not going to be so presumptuous as to
Thank you.
that I'm going to be in a position to take that. But what I will say is that I and I alone will decide who takes important and politically sensitive jobs, such as the UK ambassador to the US.
Well, the debate was now long. That's just some of it. As usual with these events, supporters of each candidate gather in the spin room, and journalists gather there too to hear what they're saying. The BBC's Vicky Young is in the thick of things. Hi, Vicky. You watched it all, and now you're being told from all sides how it went. How did you view it?
I mean, I think it was interesting because they both went in there with clear ideas about what they wanted to get across. And from Boris Johnson, it's basically saying, look, Brexit has been handled badly by someone who wasn't really believing in Brexit all along, that the country has been too defeatist and we have to be a bit more optimistic about it. Jeremy Hunt, his response to that is always to say, hang on a minute, you're not going to get through with optimism. You need some realism as well. You need some details. You can't be trying to get through on a wing and a prayer. And he's trying to really frame himself as a sensible candidate, maybe not with the charisma of Boris Johnson, but saying that that's simply not enough. Let's speak now to one of the supporters of Boris Johnson, Jason McCartney, who's with me now. You're a former MP. What did you make of it? I mean, Boris Johnson at times then not answering the question, not answering about the ambassador Kim Darroch, whether he'll still be in place, not answering whether he'd resign if he doesn't deliver Brexit at the end of October.
Well, lots of questions were posed tonight, but quite frankly, there's only one question that matters at the moment, and that's whether we're going to leave the European Union by this deadline of the 31st of October. As Boris said, delays don't make deals, deadlines do. And nothing else can happen until we have left the European Union, and then Boris can start bringing forward his positive optimistic plan for our country with his investment in schools, 20,000 bobbies on the street. He talked about infrastructure, particularly in the north of England. I'm from Yorkshire. But the biggest question, the only real question that matters tonight, is getting out of the European Union, and then we can move on to all the other big pressing issues that faces our country.
I mean, Jeremy Hunt's view, and what he said there, is that he's the candidate more likely to win across people who have gone to the Liberal Democrats, who are maybe swing voters who have voted Labour in the past, that Boris Johnson won't be able to do that. He won't bring the country together in the same way.
Well, I was in Huddersfield Market this morning with friends on a stall in Huddersfield Market, and people from all different backgrounds are backing Boris. And you only need to look in the parliamentary party as well. There are people that supported Remain at the referendum, and obviously people that supported Brexit as well. Boris has a broad base of support, and you only have to look at his programme, talking about investing in education. And when I lost my seat in 2017, you know, school funding was a big issue. I'll admit that. I am so delighted that he's grasped that. He wants to invest in our education. He talked about infrastructure. You know, people in my neck of the woods are struggling on overcrowded trains in the morning. He talked about broadband fibre connection, and he talked about crime, tackling crime. There's a crime epidemic in Huddersfield, getting more bobbies on the street.
On the tax cuts, though, that was quite interesting, because he has promised to bring in tax cuts for people who, they're not middle earners, they're high earners. They're earning £70,000 to £80,000. Is that really the right signal to put across there, that the Conservative Party wants to cut taxes for the rich?
Well, he clearly explained that he's got a package of measures, and different measures have been explained at different times. And I think he was very, very good the way he explained that he was the one that actually brought in the living wage for Londoners, and he made sure that they all got a pay rise. And I know, when speaking to Boris and speaking to his team, you know, he really understands that we need to support working families who are working hard, commuting to work, bringing money home, and that's why Boris is getting a broad brush of support. You know, he's getting support from, you know, people from different backgrounds as well. So he had a positive, optimistic message. We're going to leave the EU by the 31st of October. He's going to unite the country, and most importantly, make make sure that the mayhem of Marxism never get anywhere near number 10.
He talked there about taking a hard line with the EU, and Jeremy Hunt's response to that was to say, look, if you take a hard line with them, they'll take a hard line with you, and actually that's not how you negotiate with people who are our allies and our friends.
Well, Boris talked about negotiating, but as he said, it really is important to remember this. Delays don't make deals, deadlines do. And again, speaking to businesses in my neck of the woods in Yorkshire, even business leaders who supported Remain a couple of years ago are now saying that the delay and uncertainty is worse than anything. They want certainty. They can deal with anything that happens as long as they know what's going to happen.
But Boris Johnson
so we need to leave the EU by the 31st
the cost
of October.
No deal. He said there would be a cost with no deal, but he wouldn't say exactly what that is.
But he's the only candidate out of the two we heard tonight that is saying we're going to leave, has a plan to leave by the 31st of October. We just can't have any more of this uncertainty. It's damaging people's businesses and people's lives and jobs, but then we can have a can-do attitude, lots of positivity, lots of enthusiasm. Boris has a plan, and you can see he carried that room tonight, lots of warm response to what he said, and I'm looking forward to him hopefully becoming our Prime Minister.
Okay, Jason McCartney, thank you very much indeed. And shortly we will be speaking to someone who's in the other camp, supporting Jeremy Hunt to be Prime Minister in 2 weeks' time.
Vicky, thank you very much indeed. Yes, we'll be back with you in a few minutes here on Outside Source to get the other side of the equation, assessing that live debate. And you can also get clips from what happened during the ITV debate via the BBC News app as well. Now, we heard the two candidates there arguing over Donald Trump and the big row over the UK ambassador in Washington. Well, have a look at these pictures from earlier. Here we have Mr. Trump welcoming the Emir of Qatar to the Oval Office, but to some degree this was all overshadowed by an ever-increasing row. It's to some degree a one-way row between the US and the UK, because President Trump's daughter, Ivanka, an advisor on economic affairs to the president, is set to meet the UK's International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, but because of this diplomatic spat, the UK's ambassador to the US, Sir Kim Darroch, will not be there. The BBC's been told he's decided to not attend the meeting. Here's the BBC's Nick Bryant saying his decision, he didn't want to put Ivanka Trump in an awkward position, evidently trying to be the grown-up not in the room, notes Nick. He also says this decision was taken before the latest tweet storm, and what Nick's referring to there is a series of further attacks that President Trump has made on both Theresa May and the ambassador. He says the wacky ambassador that the UK foisted upon the US is not someone we're thrilled with, a very stupid guy. He should speak to his country and Prime Minister May about their failed Brexit negotiation and not be upset with my criticism of how badly it was gone. And then he carried on, I told Theresa May how to do that deal, but she went her own foolish way, was unable to get the deal done, a disaster. This is the President of America speaking to the UK Prime Minister. We're into uncharted territory here. He goes on, I don't know the ambassador, but have been told he's a pompous fool. Tell him the US now has the best economy and military anywhere in the world by far. And all of that was sparked by some leaked emails from Sir Kim Darroch, in which he says the Trump administration has been inept, chaotic and incoherent on occasions. Well, here's one British ambassador to the US on how the UK should handle this.
Calmly, taking a medium-long view of the situation, not rushing into doing something like getting rid of the ambassador as if we followed President Trump's orders. We have a Prime Minister who I said has given her full support to Sir Kim. She leaves the scene in just over 2 weeks' time. We'll have a new British Prime Minister. And I hope that the way that he thinks will be, well, we've got the summer break coming up. August is a time when Washington shuts down. Nobody comes back to work until after Labor Day in September. So let us give this time for passions to cool, and then we'll see where we are.
So the president calling the ambassador a pompous fool, saying he doesn't know him very well. But let's be clear, a number of his closest officials have socialised with Sir Kim Darroch. Kellyanne Conway went to a New Year's Eve party in 2017. We know the outgoing press secretary, Sarah Sanders, attended an engagement party at the British Embassy in DC. Even President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has attended a number of events held by Ambassador Darroch. And just recently, in the last few hours, the UK's Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, has been tweeting about this. We heard him talking about it at the debate as well. He says, allies need to treat each other with respect, as Theresa May has always done with you. Ambassadors are appointed by the UK government, and if I become Prime Minister, our ambassador stays. Let's bring in Anthony Zerka in Washington, D.C. With all due respect to Jeremy Hunt, my guess is that Donald Trump won't be losing sleep over the position that he's taking.
No, I mean, I don't think Donald Trump ever really gets that worked up over the criticism of his manner of going after people on Twitter, on social media, when he takes snipes of this. I think he views this as one of his strengths, that he can be blunt, that he can swipe back at people who criticize him. So, yes, you know, Washington does tend to die down in August, but as long as the ambassador is in this job, I think, you know, it'll come up whenever Donald Trump feels like picking on the UK or has an issue with them.
Is it a story in the US? I mean, clearly it's a big story here, but how does it rank in the US media?
I hate to say this, but it's barely moving the needle here in the U.S. I was looking at the front page of the New York Times website. It wasn't even linked to there. You have to scroll down a ways on the Washington Post site to see it. The cable networks, it's occasionally mentioned, but you know, the people have kind of built up a tolerance for Donald Trump going after critics on social media. So I believe it's being greeted more with a shrug here. Jeffrey Epstein, and that story is much bigger.
And so the fact that it hasn't moved the needle, is that because people are just used to Mr. Trump using this language, or is it because they don't believe it will have consequences, that it won't impact on the relationship fundamentally?
Well, you know, there was a press conference with the State Department earlier today, and the spokesman there said that they're going to continue to deal with the ambassador until they receive any sort of direction from the White House, and they haven't received any of that. They talk about the relationship with the UK being bigger than any one individual or government, and certainly this isn't the first time that we've seen Donald Trump, you know, going after someone on Twitter, and then the people in the administration, the people beneath him, essentially viewing this as him letting off steam and not taking any action unless they get specific instructions to do so. So I think there definitely is a certain amount of that going on here in the U.S. with the public. They kind of just look at this as Donald Trump once again getting in a Twitter spat, whether it's with Rosie O'Donnell or with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
All right, Anthony, thanks for taking us through it. There's Anthony live with us in Washington. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about Virgin Galactic. It hasn't sent any tourists to space yet, but it's planning to list on the New York Stock Exchange. We'll find out how that's going to work.